Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll start the consultations now. As you know that, well, not consultation, actually information session. As you know that for the past few years we've been hosting, or we've been having budget consultations before the budget gets delivered, where we get, individual and groups input into the budget. We were recently requested by a number of members of the public about having information sessions after the budget, because they say, you can come and consult us, we give our views on the budget, and then you sort of go away and do the budget, but then you have to explain to us what have you actually delivered in the budget. So this is why we've been holding these information sessions. We were at USP on Wednesday, and then we were at University of Fiji. Last night we were at Rishikul High School for people in the Nandera area, Valelevu. And tonight we are here. Tomorrow morning we are in Suva at JJ's, and then we go to Rampur College on Monday, etc., and go out to the west. So the way that we run this session is very quickly take you through some of the key initiatives as announced in the budget, and then some of the sort of key economic indicators. And then we'll open up the floor for any questions you may have. Sometimes people have some personal issues, but we can deal with that after the consultations are finished, and we can talk to you about it then. So that's how we normally run these sessions, and I'll very quickly take you through that. Of course, please feel free to ask any question you may have. Don't hesitate. No question is too hard or silly to ask, and we'll take it in that way. Okay, so essentially we'll take you through the major expenditure initiatives, the major revenue policies that we've announced, and of course the economic update and things like debt, etc. A lot of people talk about it without understanding it. So as you know, the budget focus has been on families, and we've been building upon that for the past couple of years. The other thing, of course, is we're continuing in the budget with investment in infrastructure, development, education, health, and various other areas of water, electricity, and social protection. And of course, we believe it's a responsible budget is built upon a thriving economy with strong fundamentals in place regarding socioeconomic policies we put in place. So, as you know, from the 1st of August, just very quickly, now if you come from a family that earns less than $30,000 a year, the mother has a baby, she's entitled to $1,000 upon registration of the child. Now, the reason why we are doing this, of course, is to provide some support to low-income families, but also one of the requirements is that you must register the baby in the Birth, Deaths and Marriages office. We found, for example, a few years ago, just about 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of the babies, in fact, people don't register after the birth. We found people as old as 45 years old, 55 years old without a birth certificate. They spend nearly half their life or 3/4 of their life without a birth certificate. So it costs us more money to go out and register them. So in this way, hopefully more people get registered. A lot of people actually register their children when they reach the age of 6, when they have to go to class 1. So you have to open up the BDM office late at night on Saturdays, etc. So this, of course, is one way of also getting people to register their babies. And the account will be operated by the mother. You use the first $500 when the child is born, and $500 when the child reaches year 1. Of course, we're trying to get people to use the account as a savings account for the child. So when the baby has, turns 1 or 2 or 3, somebody gives money, put some money into the account. So we're trying to create a culture of savings, which we generally don't have in Fiji. So we want to create a culture of savings. We've got an agreement with the bank that until the child reaches year 1, there won't be any fees and charges on the account. But the account will, in fact, earn interest, which is a positive thing. Maternity leave has increased now from 84 days to 98 days, which is effective from 1 Jan 2019. We've now introduced, of course, 5 days paternity leave that is applicable for fathers of babies. So when the partner or the wife gives birth, the father is entitled to 5 days leave. They can take it whilst the mother is pregnant, or after birth, or just before birth, whatever the case may be. We know generally a lot of people do take time off, but they eat into the annual leave. So this way you have a specific leave for that. We also have 5 days family care leave. Again, we know a lot of people, for example, take time off. For example, if your child gets sick, then you may need to go to in hospital or spend some time with them in hospital. Your parents get sick. In this way, of course, you're able to take specific time off. To help employers, we have said if your staff take 5 days paternity leave or family leave, you get 150% tax deduction. So this way you help the employers, so it's not too much of a burden on them if they're paying these paternity leave and also the family care leave. The funding for education has increased to about $1.035 billion. You can see we're investing a lot of money in education. This is where free education started in 2014, where you no longer have school fees from year 1 to year 13. Of course, now we have early childhood education. We now introduce, in 2014, we had toppers and we had TELs. Of course, every year that's grown, and we continue to grow, and I'll give you a breakdown regarding that. How is that $1.035 billion spent? Out of that, $534.4 million goes directly to the Ministry of Education. So like this school, even though it's committee run, all your teachers' salaries are being paid by the Ministry of Education. The textbooks are paid for by the Ministry of Education. All the other running expenses, of course, for example, your free milks, your textbooks, your bus fares, etc., is paid through this funding over here, $534.4 million. Then we give about $123.8 million to universities. Now, how is that broken down? We have operating grant of $104.8 million. This is what we call, day-to-day expenses of the universities. So we give USP 33 million, University of Fiji 4.2, Fiji National University $65.1 million. FNU, of course, is a government-owned university that used to be made up of different colleges before. You had your Coronivia Agricultural College, you had your Derrick Technical Institute, FIT, you had then, of course, the Fiji School of Medicine. All of them now have been consolidated into one and put together as FNU. Of course, then you have the Vivekananda College, Sangam Institute of Technology, Montfort Boys Town, Montfort Technical Institute, Corpus Christi, Fulton. They also receive some money too. We also provide a capital grant to FNU. So we're building a new campus in Lambasa for Fiji National University. It's costing us about $6 million. FNU campus here in Nasinu that's being upgraded. We're building a new vet lab, hospital and livestock shed, hospital for animals, and livestock shed at Coronivia for the agricultural school. Maritime Academy, $5 million. And of course, we still have about $90 million to pay for the rehabilitation of schools from the cyclones we've had. Not just Winston, but the other recent ones that we've also had. Apart from all of that, of course, apart from giving all this money to the universities, we pay to the universities the fees. So you have National Topper Scheme. Those of your children or grandchildren who receive scholarships, that's costing us about $43.8 million a year. The TELs, as you know, if your children get a place in the university now, you cannot afford to pay their fees, they can actually get a loan from us. And that is costing us now about $205.6 million a year. Civil service, we've got new scholarships, about 2.3, and other scholarships, about $7.2 million. So this entire thing makes up $1.035 billion for the education sector. Now, with the scholarships for toppers, we've actually increased it from 630 scholarships to 950 scholarships straight after year 13. We've introduced a new scholarship here, 20 new positions for students who want to study in these areas, like, if they want to do architecture and town planning, forensic accounting, actuarial science, genetic science, biology, speech therapists, etc. None of these courses are actually available in Fiji at undergraduate level. So there are some students who want to study that. They get places in university. So, but we've got a few only positions for that, 20 positions, because we can't be sending everybody overseas. It costs a lot of money. And then, of course, the national toppers altogether has now gone up to 970. We've got new scholarships for civil servants. There's a lot of teachers in Fiji who have only diploma qualifications. We want them to get degree qualifications too, so they can, of course, get better salaries. But there is a shortage of teachers. If you talk to your headmaster here, head teacher, principal here, there's a shortage of teachers in the area of science and maths. So we've got a huge focus on that. So we will give 50 local awards for teachers. So 30 awards for teachers holding a diploma to upgrade to bachelor in the area of maths, physics, language and literature, which is English, because we have a deterioration of our English language standards in Fiji. We need to improve that. And of course, information technology, industrial arts, special education and early childhood education. We also have an additional 20 awards for teachers holding a bachelor's degree to upgrade to postgraduate degree, to get a master's or a PhD. I remember when I was in high school, many decades ago, we had teachers who had masters who used to teach us in high school. It's a rarity now to actually have teachers in specialized areas, in masters, to actually be holding teacher positions in high schools. So again, this is in the area of maths, physics, language and literature, which is in English. We also then have additional overseas awards for postgraduate studies in the area of teacher training, tourism, agriculture, fisheries and forest. 20 awards for people from within the civil service and 20 from outside. So even people in the private sector will be eligible for these awards. And of that, of course, we have 10 for PhD, 5 for civil service and 5 for outside. So we don't even mind giving a PhD scholarship to somebody who may be working in the private sector if they're very good in that particular field of discipline. We've increased the allowances for, we started giving scholarships for disabled children. And there's a couple of disabled people at university level who are actually studying for, we pay for them. So the allowances have now been aligned with the current toppers. And of course now for TELS, before, if a student was receiving TELS, we also gave them allowances, but only if their family earned $25,000 or less. So now we've increased the threshold to $50,000. So they're also eligible now for allowances if they earn if the family earns up to $50,000. Bus fares for tertiary students have been increased to $30 a week because some of them say travel from Nosori to Suva or Navua to Suva or Ba to Lotoka. And we've also, because of the shortage of doctors too, we're trying to encourage more people to do medicine. There are some people who may already be a pharmacist or may have done a Bachelor of Science. So if they want to go off and do medicine, there's 30 places reserved for them to do what we call their graduate students, so they can get some cross credits. Now, about TELS, if you, for example, most people who do degrees subjects, the loans would be somewhere between $20,000 and about $50,000, $49,000. So we've been looking at this for a number of years now, so we've looked at some discounting. See, if, for example, say I do a bachelor in teaching, so if I take my TELS, if I get the government to pay for my university fees and I take also allowances, living allowances, my debt could be somewhere around about $35,000, right? About $35,000, $36,000. So if I'm in that category, if I make my 50% of my payment of that debt in 3 years or less, we will actually forgive the 50% of the debt, the other 50% of the debt. It's what you call accelerated payment. Because if you took your time to pay it for the next 15 years, obviously the dollar value, what we'll get from you, will be less than what we actually give you today. So this is the reason why we have an accelerated payment system. And this is obviously to entice people to pay quicker, and also for us to be able to get the money quicker, but it's an incentive for them also to do so. Now, the reality is this, that today 50% of the Fijian population is below the age of 27. So all of you over the age of 27, you're basically in the minority. In fact, 70% of the population is below the age of 40. So people like me and all of you who are over the age of 40 in the minority. People below the age of 40 are the majority. So we have to think about the future. I know some people have come along and say, we'll forgive the debt. You'll make tertiary education free, etc., but they don't actually talk about high schools. Now, the reality is this. If your 50% of the population is below the age of 27, these people will be making lots of babies. The younger the population, the more babies will be produced. That's a reality. So who's going to pay for the university? Already our TEL's debt is in excess of $700 million. Are you going to say that all of the debt will be wiped off? What will happen to the future? That all these kids over here in this school, in 4 or 5 years' time, will be coming every year out of school and going to university. Is it sustainable? So this is why people actually do have to pay for the debt. But what we have said is that we have an accelerated payment system. So you pay 50%, in less than 3 years, we forgive 50% of the debt. You pay that in 3 to 6 years, we forgive 25% of the debt. You pay in 6 to 8 years, we forgive 10% of the debt. It's to entice people to pay it off, of course, because they'll be paying for the future generations too. We've got a new Ministry of Housing. There's been set up, Ministry of Housing and Community Development. First home purchase grant has increased to 15 million. Now what that means is this. If you earn less than $50,000 and you have not got your first home, you're living in a rented house, you don't have a house under your name, and you want to buy your first home, you want to build your first home, we will actually give you a grant. A grant means you don't have to pay us back. But you have to go through the financial system. You have to go through a bank. So when you go to a bank and you say, I want to buy my home, or I want to build my home, my loan application, this is my loan application, the bank will assess it and they say, yes, you can do the repayment, you have enough income that you make. And then you say, by the way, I want to apply for my grant. The bank approves the loan, the grant form is sent to the Ministry of Housing, they approve it because the bank has approved it. So you get this grant. So this grant goes towards the building of the home or the purchase of the home. The reason why we give $15,000 towards the home construction is because we actually like people to build. When you build something, it creates jobs. You need somebody to dig the foundation, somebody to lay the tiles, lay the bricks, paint the building, do the plumbing, do the roof, etc. It creates a lot more jobs. That's why we're more interested in construction. But as was advertised in the Fiji Sun a few days ago, we gave the full details of it. What we have said is that if you also buy a home from an approved developer, strata title developer, then we'll also give you $15,000. If you earn more than $50,000, but up to $100,000, we'll give you a grant of $10,000 and $5,000. So that's how the system works. There's a lot of interest in this area. We already, in fact, yesterday I talked to the PS for local housing. They received 150 phone calls in one day. A lot of people are interested in this area, and we want to increase the rate of home ownership. In Fiji, the rate of home ownership is very low. And a lot of people tend to buy their first home when in their late 30s or 40s because people don't give it a priority. And we also have to change our mindset about what is a home. A lot of people think buying your first home means a block of land and one house on it. But it can also mean if you have apartments, you own the apartment. That can be a first home. If you go overseas, that's what people actually own. You go to places like Singapore, even if you go to places like India and various other countries in the world, people actually own apartments. They get a 99-year lease. In the same way you get a 99-year lease over land. So they own the apartment. Now to own apartments is actually much cheaper to build and to buy. So you may own the first bedroom, which a one-bedroom house could be yours. So instead of going to the money lender to borrow money, you have a house, you go to the mainstream banks. So that's what we're trying to generate. So I do better, I may get married, I buy my two-bedroom flat. Or I buy a house, with land on it. But the idea is to build your first asset, buy your first asset at an early age. We also have a provision for what we call first land purchase. If you want to buy a land, a lot of people actually want to buy, what you call buy a lease. They want to lease land, 99-year lease, either Crown land or Itauke land. So normally you have to buy the lease, $10,000, $15,000. This will go towards that. You of course have to do the lease repayments on a yearly basis yourself. But this goes towards the purchase of the lease. But you have to earn less than $50,000 a year in your income. We've also said that we will subsidize your first home buyers. Now, if at the moment, in fact we started this last year, The Reserve Bank has made a facility available that if banks are lending to people who have this, who've applied for this grant and earn less than $50,000, if they get a loan, then the banks can borrow from the Reserve Bank at 1% interest. And then the banks can lend to you at 5% or less. So they make a margin of about 3.5 or 3.75%. And they lend to you at that rate. What we have said now, in order to make it easy for people, even easier, we will subsidize another 1%. So if the bank is offering you 4.75, 4.8% interest rate, we'll make it 3.8% for you. In particular, if you earn less than $50,000 a year. So that way, your repayment is less, you're incentivized to buy a house. We've also got $750,000 covering the cost of land surveys. I know a lot of homes in Vudi and places like that where people don't have proper leases because the land has not been surveyed. So we've now got an allocation. So you can make an application and then we'll get your land surveyed for you. Once your land is surveyed, you get a proper lease. And of course, when you get a proper lease, you get a proper title. It means that you can build your home and nobody can boot you out. And you can go and use the mortgage. You can use the title or the lease as a mortgage with the bank and you can get a loan. So in that way, people are incentivized to build better homes. We also have, continuing with the proper lease to Fijians in informal settlements, and we have social housing over the 1/3, 2/3. We're doing some changes there, and we'll make announcements on that later on. Now, the other issue is about the FNTC. Now, before I start that, at the moment, for example, if you get sick and you can't afford to go and see a private doctor, you go to Nasori Health Center, you go to the hospital, wherever it is. So in the morning I wake up and I've got the flu, I want to go and see a doctor, I go to the health center. There's a long queue. It's not an emergency, it's a run-of-the-mill, it's an ordinary type of consultations with the doctor. Now if you go to various other countries, for that type of medical treatment or diagnosis, you normally go and see a GP, a private doctor. We're going to introduce that from next year, from the 1st of Jan. So what that means is that you go to a GP, and so if I wake up in the morning, I've got the flu, I go into a private doctor, and my consultation fee will be paid for by the government for, what you call non-sophisticated medical problem. Of course, if my hand has been chopped off, I don't go to the GP, I'll go to the hospital. Or if I'm suffering from a heart attack, I'm going to go to the hospital, I'm not going to go to the GP. But if it's a run-of-the-mill, maybe I've got a minor cut or I've got the flu and I'm going to see a doctor, then you can go to the GP. Now, that of course, there are two, three reasons why we're doing that. Of course, it puts less pressure on the public health system. We want only emergency cases and sophisticated cases to go to the hospitals. And also, if you then do that, then the queues in the hospitals will actually get reduced. But it also means we're able to then get, for example, private GPs in various places where they currently aren't. Korovo, I understand, does not have a GP. So people in Korovo, if they want to see a private doctor, they have to come to Nasori. There's no private doctor in Korovo. There's no private doctor in Nasarawanga. There's no private doctor in Nambuwalu. There's no private doctor, I don't think, even in Senganga. So all of these places, we need private doctors to go there. It puts less pressure. It means people don't have to travel long distances. And we also got a budgetary allocation to incentivize them to set up in those places. Now, of course, if we are going to say to you that you can go and see a private doctor and we'll pay for you, the money has to come from somewhere. We can't just pull the money out of the air. At the moment, every employer in Fiji has to contribute to the FNTC, what you call the FNTC levy. So you have to pay 1% of your salary bill to FNTC. Big employers, small employers, everybody has to pay FNTC levy by law. So what we have said that we collect at the moment about $21 million. FNTC gets about $21 million from this levy. We said from the 1st of Jan, 50% of that FNTC levy of $21 million will go towards paying for these GPs, about $11 million. And 40% of that will go towards paying workers' compensation. At the moment, assuming that I'm a worker somewhere, and if I get injured, say I'm using a machine, and I get injured, I lose my finger. So, I've been injured at workplace. Your employer is supposed to have workers' compensation insurance. A lot of people we know don't have workers' compensation insurance. Some guy is running a mechanic shop in the backyard or in somewhere in some Nosori industrial area. He's got 4 or 5 workers. Now, if his employee gets injured or gets trapped under the car, he's supposed to have workers' compensation insurance. A lot of them don't have it. Now, what we found, the system is very archaic. So the poor guy's leg gets caught under, or he gets caught under, he gets injured, he goes to the hospital, you run around to lawyers, you go to the Ministry of Labour, there's, sometimes very difficult to get payments. In the same way, we changed third-party insurance. Before, as you know, third-party insurance, if you get injured on the road, you have to go to a lawyer. It takes ages. Sometimes people die or people get injured and the witnesses all fall off. The lawyers are very good at getting adjournments, hoping that you'll forget about it. The whole system worked that way. So we moved third-party insurance to the ACCF this year. So you would have seen in the news how ACCF is now paying out the payments within 24 hours of the injury actually taking place or the documentation being filed. So from the 1st of Jan also, if I lose my finger at work, it's been established, you don't have to say whose fault it was, it's what you call a no-fault system. I don't have to say, oh no, he made a mistake, he was singing a song and forgot and put his finger inside. Those kind of things. He got injured at work, he's right-handed, there's a price for the finger. The different prices for different fingers, depending on what the fingers are. This is how it works overseas. Of course, somebody has to pay for it. Where will you get the money from? 40% of the $21 million will go towards that. There's no new budgetary allocation. What we've simply done is realigned the expenditures. And of course, 1% continues to go to the FNTC levy, which continue to run. And of course, we have made some new allowances also. If an employer now will train his staff, give in-house training, they can claim that is 150% tax deduction. Now, we've got what we call bundle insurance, both for civil servants and people on welfare. I'd like to cover this. This is a very basic insurance. We had this, we've done this with sugarcane farmers, copra farmers, dairy farmers, rice farmers, rice growers. We've done it with them also. So it's a very cheap form of insurance. It's about $50, $52 per year. That's the premium. But they want group insurance. So what we've decided, there's a lot of people on social welfare, for example. Now, assuming I'm already on social welfare, and if my house catches fire and my house burns down, I'm already also a social welfare recipient. How will I get my money to build my house? So again, they'll come to government. So we are also protecting ourselves now. So by having this insurance, assuming I'm social welfare recipient, my house burns down, I have a house fire, I get $3,000. Even if I live as a squatter, I get $3,000. Now, if I get personally injured, I also get $3,000. Of course, it has to be serious. It's not like I just trip and I get $3,000. I know some people try and claim it, but of course, if somebody dies, then the beneficiary gets $3,000. And of course, there's $1,000 for funeral expenses. So this is a very basic form of insurance, but we've decided to give it to the social welfare recipients because they already are, people who do need money. This is one way of looking after them. But it also protects government too. Otherwise, they'll be dependent more on government. The insurance companies can pay for it. So, we're trying to be smart about it so, we don't have unexpected expenses. Of course, we've extended that to civil servants and also members of disciplined forces. By November of this year, we hope to get insurance for homes. As you know, under Cyclone Winston, during Cyclone Winston and the other cyclones we've recently had, government has paid out lots of money to help people rebuild their homes. We cannot continue to do this. It's expensive. The first lot cost us about $125 million just to help people build their homes. The second lot cost us about $110 million. If you have a cyclone every year, we cannot continue to do this. So we're trying to get insurance cover for this. And we hope to have that in place. We have in fact allocated $1 million in our budget to help pay the premiums for this. And it's what you call parametric insurance. Parametric insurance means is that you have one price for all the homes. And if, for example, the system works this way. If the cyclone comes down this path, all the homes in this path will get a payout of X amount of dollars. We don't come and individually assess the homes. It's what you call parametric insurance. Those who fall outside the path won't get anything. Next time the cyclone goes down this path, everybody on this path will get the payout. So it actually helps the government too also to be able to not have to spend too much money, but also gives people a particular level of assurance. And we're working on a similar insurance product for crop insurance. We're spending a lot of money on digital, what we call the digital revolution. As you know that we've spending money on Wailesi. I don't know how many of you have Wailesi box. Now you can get Wailesi. We're doing an upgrade. You've got redundancy. So now you can watch free-to-air television, whether you live in the southern tip of Lau, you live in Rotuma, you live in the inlands of Naitasiri, anywhere you can get it. Some places, of course, you don't need the dish. Other places, you need the dish. And it's free to air. In other words, you get your 8 channels all the time. Right? And you don't have to pay a monthly subscription. So one of the things we're also doing in the rural areas, we're trying to use it also in terms of data feedback too. We are creating what we call Wi-Fi hotspots over here. So all the FNU campuses will be Wi-Fi'd. So it's what you call geofence. So we'll say, okay, if we say geofence this school, right around the school compound, if we set it as a Wi-Fi hotspot, the speed will increase and the bandwidth will increase. So the students and the kids and the teachers can, of course, use it for internet usage. We also are creating mobile phone apps. So a lot of the government services now will be available on your phones itself. This one about promoting electronic transactions. When you go to, say, the supermarket and you buy your groceries, you sometimes use your ATM card. So you swipe the machine and you say $100 groceries and you pay for that. When you actually pay for your groceries, whatever it is, through your card, the bank charges you 40 cents transaction fee. The bank also charges for the same transaction 30 cents to the merchant, to the shopkeeper. So the bank makes 70 cents on each transaction. So we want more and more people to use electronic transactions because it's a lot easier. You don't have to carry cash. And also it's good for us, and I'll tell you why, or some of the other reasons. So the banks have now agreed that from the 1st of Jan, there won't be any fees charged to you. So when you go and swipe your card to buy something, the 40 cents won't be taken off from your account. So that will be free for you. But for the merchant, it will still be 30 cents. We've got some provision here where we will actually help them reduce the cost for the merchants too. That's what we are working on. We also have a budgetary allocation. Those actual machines, they cost about 500 Australian dollars each. So about 750 Fijian dollars. So we want to have more shops to actually have these machines. So it's easier for you too, because the more shops have these machines, then we can do more electronic transactions. And I'll tell you why electronic transactions are very important. Now, one of the reasons we want to bring down the cost, if you go to New Zealand or somewhere like that, you can buy a bottle of water from a shop through your ATM card. You swipe the card, you pay $1.20, they'll take it off your card. But you go to Fiji, nobody will let you use your card for $1.20. They'll say minimum, purchase of $10. Most people say $10. We want that to be reduced. You see, because one of the significant reasons is this. When you actually buy something through electronic means, the money stays in the system. So, assuming this gentleman here has an ANZ card, right? He has an account with ANZ. When he swipes his card and pays the $100 groceries, electronically his $100 from ANZ goes to the shopkeeper's account, right? Because you're paying for it. It immediately goes to the shopkeeper's account. The shopkeeper may actually have his account with Westpac. Money goes from ANZ to Westpac immediately. But the money does not come out of the banking system. When the money does not come out of the banking system, that means the cash stays in the banking system. When the cash stays within the banking system, the cost of money comes down. So when you go and borrow a loan, when you take out a loan, the interest rate will be lower. But if people keep on taking out money from the system, then there's pressure on the cash. So the banks have pressure on the cash. If they want to give you cash, they charge you a high interest rate. So when you do more electronic transactions, the money stays within the system, and when you want to borrow money, the cost of the credit actually is less. Now, the other point also is that a lot, this e-ticketing. Just imagine before what used to happen with the bus companies. They used to get the coins, the cash, they take it, they measure, they count it. Then they have some guy with a handcuff, then he goes to the bank, queues up in the bank, then the teller counts it. It costs money. There's a risk factor. So of course now they don't have to go to the bank. The money all goes from the e-ticket to the account. It gets reconciled. They don't have somebody sit there to count the money. The same way with the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper who actually has does the sales, he or she does not have to go to the bank. It also means we know how much money they are making, so they're paying the right taxes too. It's also very important. Everybody needs to pay the right taxes. Now, health and medical services, very quickly, we're building, of course, a number of hospitals. Nasori has been an issue for us, as you know, that we had earmarked to build a hospital in Nasori, on top of that hill. Is it Vunivivi Hill? But that actually has not worked out. We've identified another land which we hope to finalize very soon. Vunivivi was, of course, in a hilly place. We wanted to make sure that it is in a lot more flat place, and so you get better synergies as far as that is concerned. But we're building a lot of hospitals around the place, subdivisional hospitals. We're putting one up in, for example, in Kayasi. Valelevu is being upgraded. The kidney dialysis treatment subsidy, we are working with Dr. Krishnan, who is the only nephrologist in Fiji. In fact, the only nephrologist in the South Pacific. He's somebody who, of course, has dealt with the renal, what we call kidney problems, renal failure. And we're working very closely with him. He's identified about 600 people that may need access to kidney dialysis machines. And as we have said before, that it's a very fine line. In fact, we have more people in Fiji dying not because of kidney problem, but because of heart problems. A lot more people in Fiji die because of cardiovascular problems or cardiovascular events. It's a big problem. So, a lot of people talk about kidney dialysis, they talk about as if all of us are dying of kidney dialysis, renal problems, kidney problems. It's not. It's just only a small group of people. Nonetheless, what we've said, we're setting up 2 centers, one in Nandera and the other one in Nandi. When you're saying Suva, it means Nandera here. So people who earn less than $30,000 will pay $50% of the cost of the treatment of the kidney dialysis, and one treatment is $150, and we'll pay 50% of that. Free medicine will continue, but we've changed the system now. Before, the way free medicine worked is when you went to a private hospital to get free medicine, we used to give them the stock of medicine. They had to keep it themselves. Sometimes they did not want to keep it. They said, we don't have space. That's why sometimes there are shortages, in the private pharmacies. So now what we said, you keep the drugs yourself, and you simply invoice us when an individual comes and uses the drugs. So that's how the system will work now. We're setting up a public-private partnership in Ba and Lautoka Hospital. Recently, sorry, I forgot to mention, the PS Economy is here with me. The Shri Gandhar, he's here. He's the head of fiscal policy in Ministry of Economy. Kamal Gandhar is in planning. And Pankaj is here somewhere. Pankaj Singh is also our debt manager. He's sitting somewhere, he's probably very shy. And then the other person actually heads one of the departments in economy is also Iso Atalemaimbau, who looks after the day-to-day running of the budget area. But anyway, the PS and Shri and I were in India just about a week ago. We met up with interested parties that are looking at running Lautoka and Ba hospitals. We've set up certain conditions. You know how I mentioned to you about open heart surgeries and cardiovascular problems. If any one of us, God forbid, at the moment has a heart attack now, there's not a single doctor in Fiji that can do an open heart surgery on any one of us. No doctor in Fiji can do a bypass surgery, which is actually a tragedy in this 21st century. Now, you do not turn doctors out overnight who can do open heart surgeries. You need 10, 15, 12 years of experience and exposure before you can cut somebody's chest open, lift up the ribs, play with the heart, shut it down, and then let them go off and do open heart surgery. So one of the conditions of this PPP is that whichever medical provider comes in, they must actually provide 24/7 open heart surgery facilities. They must also provide chemotherapy for cancer, etc. Oncology services, which also needs to be made available. They need to build a new wing in Lautoka Hospital. They need to build operating theaters where you have what we call viewing areas for students. So when people are doing surgeries, people can actually watch and learn from that. And of course, Ba, we built a new hospital, they'll be running that too. So we hope to get some announcements made in this roundabout in the next probably 6 to 8 weeks' time, hopefully, in about 8 weeks' time. Of course, I've talked about the GPs. You can see the funding for health, how much funding has increased over the past number of years. Sugar and agriculture, just very, very quickly. Is that mine? This one. Again, talking about sugar, I know you don't do much sugarcane planting in this area, you may not be interested that much in sugar, but the reality is that what we believe is that you need to be able to reduce your input cost. You can say that we'll give you $100 a ton or $150 a ton, but if the input cost is high, so for you to produce that ton of cane will cost you $90 and you get paid $100, you're only making a $10 margin. But if you get, for example, if it costs you, $50 to make that one ton of cane, then of course you're making a $50 margin. So the input cost is always very important. In the same way the people who run taxis. It's good to get a fare, but if your tire is expensive, if your fuel is expensive, if the price of oil and etc. is expensive, of course then your margin will be lower. So input cost is very, very important. So this is why we started these new subsidies last year actually. Things like fertilizer subsidy, weedicide subsidy, we've got new farm assistance, a lot of farm mechanization is taking place too. The sugarcane industry, of course, has a number of challenges too. Many of the farmers, of course, the children no longer want to do sugarcane farming. They want to go into other professions. They've got their mobile phones, they want to work in the tourism sector, they want to do other things. The whole basis of the sugarcane industry in Fiji has been built on the premise that if my grandfather was a farmer, my father became a farmer, and then the son became a farmer and continued. You generally don't have a lot of people coming from outside except during cane cutting season time. Of course, not many people want to cut cane now too. So this is why we're bringing cane harvesters. We're using now prisoners who get paid to come and cut sugar cane. So there's a number of challenges in that area. We've of course now said that we've set up a sugar stabilization fund. So for the next 3 years, the farmers are guaranteed $85 per ton for the next 3 years. So they have security. So they know every year it used to change. Some year maybe 85, maybe less, maybe more. This way we have $85. If, for example, the market price is $70, the farmers will still get $85 because the stabilization fund will actually pay the difference. The way the stabilization fund has been set up is that FSC has sold some assets of its, and so that is being put aside in a separate fund, and government, of course, will contribute towards that. I'm particularly interested and very excited about this building the local goat meat industry, which is $1 million we've set aside. Goat meat, as you know, everybody eats goat meat in Fiji. And of course, it's a very lean meat. It's a healthy meat. It's not fatty meat. But in order to, so far, the goat meat industry has not been there as such. It's very, disorganized. It's unlike the chicken industry, the poultry industry. If tomorrow rooster or crest chicken closes down, we'll actually have to import chicken. There's not enough chicken meat being made locally. Some people have a small few chickens here and there. That cannot meet the domestic demand. If tomorrow crest and rooster shuts down, we have to start importing our chickens from Australia and New Zealand. Probably only New Zealand because Australia has what we call a Newcastle disease. We don't bring in any chickens from Australia. We only bring in chickens from New Zealand. I think it's Teagle. So what we need to do is create a local goat meat industry. And as you know, the Crest system, the way it works, the way Crest does, Crest has its own farm, but it also outsources chicken rearing to other farmers. So a lot of people actually, a lot of villages, a lot of farmers, they come and give them the chicks. They say, okay, you raise it for the next 36 weeks or whatever it is, we'll buy it from you at this price. So it creates a lot of income for a lot of people. We can do a similar thing with goats. There's one particular goat farm between Ba and Latoka. They already have 1,000 goats. So they want to have a system where they can have, the small kids. A baby goat is called a kid. They can give 4 to 5 kids to some sugarcane farmer, some villages, etc. I say, you rear the goats. When it becomes this old, we'll come and buy it from you at this price. And then you have a proper abattoir, so you can go down to the New World supermarket and buy a fresh goat meat. In the same way that you buy, a chicken. frozen chicken all comes from Fiji. So we should be able to have goat meat available in that way too. So that's the focus that we're going to have for the goat meat industry. Of course, this area, we've had TB and brucellosis in the dairy farming industry. And the way we've been dealing with it, for example, if this is the farm, there's about 5 cows that have been affected or infected with it. We take the 5 cows, we kill the 5 cows. But what they've done in other places like New Zealand, if that particular farmer has been infected even by 2 or 3 cows, they kill the entire lot of cows in that pasture. They replant the pasture so it's very clean, it's sanitized altogether. That's what we need to do if we want to get out of this rut that we are in. Civil service reforms, of course, we're doing a number of things like the PMS is being implemented. It will be backdated to the 1st of August. That should be put in place by January of this year. We've increased funding to the provincial councils and the Itauke Affairs Board to make their pay rises in alignment with the Ministry of Civil Service pay rises, the Civil Service pay rises. So very quickly, as you know that if you go and stay at a hotel, if you go and rent a car, if you go and watch a movie, if you go and drink beer at a nightclub or a pub, then you have to pay STT and ECAL, Service Turnover Tax, Environmental Climate Adaptation Levy. So that boils down to about 16%. So that's what you have to pay. But, of course, you don't pay STT and ECAL if you go and eat at a restaurant here in Nosori. You don't pay that. Or if you go to and buy groceries, you don't pay any of that tax. It's only for those specific areas, what we call luxury items. So what we've said is that any of those businesses in those areas, if they earn less than $1.25 million a year, they no longer have to pay STT or ECAL. So, for example, if I'm running a small motel, I've got 4 or 5 rooms, and I make less than obviously $1 million a year, I don't need to pay STT and ECAL. It's only for the bigger businesses. So if I go to Denarau and eat at an expensive restaurant, that's where you pay STT and ECAL. I heard one of the political parties say in one of the meetings recently that they'll remove STT and ECAL from all groceries. It's not applicable on groceries in the first place. So it's a lie, frankly. Again, as I mentioned, 150% tax deduction for paternity and family care leave. If you train your staff, you can also claim 150% tax deduction. If you do research and development in ICT and renewable energy sectors, you get a 250% tax deduction. We have enormous potential in the ICT area. If you look at most of the young people in Fiji today, they're on this all the time. There's an enormous amount of jobs that can be created through the ICT sector. And we've got a lot of companies that have already started doing businesses in Fiji, and you'll see there's about 40,000 new jobs have been created in the past 5 years. A lot of it, of course, in the new areas that we are talking about, and of course there's a lot more potential in that space. If you go to a lot of our towns and cities, if you see many of the buildings, it's very run down, it's not clean, they have not painted it. So we're trying to incentivize these people, these business people. So if they invest about $1 million, then we'll give them 25% investment allowance. We are hosting the Asian Development Bank annual meeting in Fiji next year in May. For the first time, it's never been held in the Pacific. There'll be 4,500 people coming to Nandi for 1 week. So you can imagine the amount of money that'll be coming in as a result of that. They stay at our hotels, they eat our food, they use the transportation. A lot of them, of course, will stay back. So what we're saying, people who want to sponsor that particular event, they get 150% tax deduction. We're also working with ADB and various other organizations about getting electric buses in Fiji. So if somebody wants to bring an electric bus, they get a 55% capital deduction for the buying of the electric bus. If we set up an electric charging station, again, we're looking at various incentives for that too. We've reduced the duty on these fruits. A lot of these fruits are imported from overseas. The duty, for example, on apples and oranges imported from overseas used to be 32%. We brought it down to 15, we brought it down to 5, and now we have zero rated duty on these items. I mean, none of these, we don't grow cranberries, we don't grow, kiwi fruits, pears, oranges, and grapes. The whole idea is to bring down the cost so you pay less money for that. We've also reduced the duty on tea. Tea that you drink every day used to be 5%, with zero rated duty on tea. And we introduced a new specific duty on, or excise duty, on carbonated drinks, your fizzy drinks, the Cokes and what have you. in order to disincentivize people to drink those things. We want them to drink less of it. But what we found, that a lot of the companies started bringing cheap carbonated drinks from overseas. So in order to stop them from doing that, we've also put in a duty of $2 per liter on those cheap carbonated drinks, the fizzy drinks. And of course, the duty on cigarettes and alcohol went up by 15%. The plastic bag levy has gone up from 10 cents to 20 cents. Plastic bag levy, of course, is charged when you go to the supermarket, when you go to a pharmacy, when you go to a service station. But if you go to the Nosori market and buy your chorea and then they put it in a plastic bag, they don't charge you money for that. Because at the moment there's no levy at the markets. But what we're saying, by 2020 there'll be a complete ban on plastic bags in Fiji. Because it's causing a lot of problems for us, plastic bags. A lot of people don't realize. A lot of you may not realize that the fish that you're eating, we've actually recently, this morning only today, we had a gathering of people regarding plastics and the uses of plastic. And studies have now shown through the USP that a lot of the fish actually have plastic particles in it too, the fish itself that you are eating. So it's a huge problem for us. So we're going to ban plastic bags by 2020. So you've been now given essentially 1.5 years notice. So there's a lot of bags that a lot of the mothers make, the reusable bags, the jolly. People used to use the jolly before, go to the market before plastic bags came in. People can do that again now. And we can make use of that. And in fact, you can create a lot of jobs as a result of that. Now, one of the things that we also found was that, as you know, that you cannot import a vehicle in Fiji, a second-hand vehicle, if it's 5 years or older. Now, so what people started doing was they used to bring in cars that were like 4 years and 11 months, 4 years and 9 months old. They just made it less than 5 years, and then they would bring into the market and sell it to you. Now, that kind of defeats the purpose, because what we're trying to do is get you to bring in newer second-hand vehicles. So in order to incentivize the car dealers and also the consumers to buy younger second-hand vehicles, we have said that the duty will come down from 32% to 15% if the vehicle that's brought into Fiji is 2 years or younger. So if the vehicle is 2 years or younger, the duty will be 15%. But if it's older than 2 years and up to 5 years, the duty will be 32%. Now, similarly for taxis too. As you know, taxis, if you bring in taxis, we had a 50% concession on what you pay as a normal rate. So also that will come down and it will be halved. So it becomes what, 5%? So 7.5%. So if you're buying a taxi that's 2.5 years or younger, second-hand vehicle, the duty will be 7.5%. Just very quickly, we talk a lot about, in particular in Parliament, we talk about how the economy has grown for 9 years straight. Now, this is the period here. It's grown 9 years straight. Now, when the economy grows 9 years straight, it means that the value of our GDP, gross domestic product, increases substantially. You see, our economy, the value of our GDP in 1970 was 0.2 billion. 1 billion, 2 billion, 3.6 billion. 2008, it was $5.6 billion. That's how much our GDP is worth. Because we've grown for 9 years, suddenly it's become $11.3 billion. It's almost doubled our GDP. So in other words, we've become wealthier as a country and we're able to afford a lot more things that we weren't able to afford. But this is what 9 years of growth does. Can you imagine if we continue to grow over here, then this GDP will grow even more. I'll show you over here in the next slide. You can see over here. You see, when you grow, but you have 1 year of growth, then 1 year it does not grow, 1 year it grows, 1 year it does not grow, your GDP does not grow at a quicker rate. Over here, we've grown 9 years consecutively. This was Cyclone Winston. So even though the growth rate was slow because of Cyclone Winston, we lost about $1.3 billion worth of our GDP. If Cyclone Winston had not occurred, it would have been a completely different area altogether. So even though it slowed down, the fact is it still grew. So as a result of that, our GDP has grown substantially. Now, it's predicted to continue to grow. So what is really important for you to know, we need consistency in policy. We need consistency in the same way of thinking. Otherwise, your economy can go up and down. That's what you don't want. Now, what does that mean? it has meant that unemployment has declined to 4.5%. You see, this is the rate of unemployment. It's gone down to 4.5%, which means that 40,000 jobs has been created in the last 5 years. 40,000 new jobs has been created in the last 5 years. Now, there are various measures. RBF normally looks at the job advertisements. Until 2014, they only used to look at the job advertisements in the Fiji Times. From 2014, they've started looking at both Fiji Times and Fiji Sun. If you look at FNPF here, you see this green one is what you call the new compulsory membership, the new ones. The blue one is here is compulsory withdrawal when people turn 55. So if you take the new compulsory membership, which is about 20,000, and you minus the compulsory withdrawal, you get 13,000 new memberships altogether. So it shows you the FNPF2 that the membership is growing. And membership only grows when you have new people joining the workforce. Now, people talk about inflation. Price of things are going up. What are the things that leads to price of things going up? Now, I'll give you an example. You've got fuel, food, and other imports. Now, most of you would probably eat bread, most of you eat roti, most of you eat cakes, bambakau, whatever it is. Now, roti and cakes and bread is made from flour. What is flour made from? Flour is made from wheat. Do we grow wheat? We don't grow wheat. We have to buy wheat from overseas. There are only two companies in Fiji that buy wheat and they grind it and they make flour. FMF and Punja and Sons. Now when they buy the wheat from Australia, if tomorrow the Australian wheat prices go up from say $1,000 a ton to $5,000 a ton, we have no control. You have no control. When they bring it into Fiji, it's at $5,000 a ton, hypothetically, I'm pulling out these figures from the air, $5,000 a ton. Then when they make the flour, then we do the price control on the flour. We of course can't do the price control on the wheat because it's not our wheat. When it becomes flour here, then we price control. We say to FMF and Punja and Sons, okay, your margin can only be about 4% or 5%, whatever it is. That's what happens. So whether you reduce VAT or increase VAT, whatever it is, the input cost will be determined by the people who supply that to you. In the same way with fuel. The price of fuel, as you know, those of you who drive taxis and buses, a few months ago, fuel was being sold in the world market price about $40 a barrel. Today, the price of fuel is about $62 a barrel. Now, in 2008, the price of fuel was $140 a barrel. We have no control over it. That's the price they're selling it at, that's the price you have to buy. Yes, when it comes here, then we price control it. So the input cost is something we don't have any control whatsoever. When it's winter in northern hemisphere, it's cold, winter in USA, in Europe, Russia and all those places, the price of fuel will always go up because they need more fuel to keep themselves warm. Use it for the radiators and what have you, electricity plants. When it's summer there, the price of fuel will drop. Of course, if there's some war happening in the Middle East, the shortage of fuel, the price of fuel will go up. What can Fiji do about it? Zero. No control over that whatsoever. People need to understand that. In the same way, when you had Cyclone Winston, a small bunch of bananas in Suva, after Cyclone Winston, which normally cost $5, used to cost $20. Long beans cost $5 a bundle. But people knew that because there was a flood. All the vegetable farms got damaged. Do you have any control over it? No. You can't control it. After Cyclone Winston, Yangona cost $180 a kilo. Till today is $140 a kilo. Some farmers in Vunimono, I went with the Honorable PM some months back, he sold his entire crop, cover dealer, $2 million worth of crops. That's the price he's getting. So it's supply and demand driven. It's not something that government sits there every day and controls. It's a different matter. So that's what happens. If we found oil in Fiji, fantastic. We can then control the price of fuel ourselves. But we don't. If we grew wheat, fantastic. We don't grow wheat. Our climate is not suitable for growing wheat. This is why I keep on saying, try and buy more local food. grow more local food, because then their cost will come down. So when they measure inflation, they look at number of products in what people use on a daily basis. So you have things like inflation here, you'll have fuel, you have flour and other things, including you'll have alcohol, tobacco and kava, because a lot of people use it to measure the overall cost of goods. So in 2015, the inflation rate was 1.6, of which 0.6% came from alcohol, tobacco and kava. In 2016, inflation was 3.9, of which kava, alcohol and tobacco contributed 2.7%. In other words, the inflation rate of other things was only 1.2. But look at it today, it's 4.6%. Alcohol, tobacco, and kava contributes 1.7, but 2.9 is from other things. Because why? Because the price of fuel has gone up. Price of fuel has now gone up to $62 a barrel. That will of course have an impact. And of course in this year we also had things like Kenny and all those cyclones that has an impact. I went up to the Valley Road after Cyclone Kenny and Josie. Entire farms were washed away. People had just put in their beans and their chorayas and their bagans and everything. It just rotted because there's too much water. The water went away, but the mud still stays there. All the plants just die off. There's a shortage of it. So this is the problem. That's why we don't like cyclones. Apart from the fact it kills people, damages infrastructure, it also pushes up the price of goods. Vegetables. Now, foreign reserves. This is very important. A lot of people don't understand foreign reserves. When you buy the taxi or you buy the car, I'm holding this pointer, this is laptop, this young gentleman is wearing a watch, he's holding a phone. All of these things are not made in Fiji. This fan is not made in Fiji. So we need to buy these things from overseas. When we buy these things from overseas, they don't sell it to us in Fijian dollars, they sell it to us in US dollars. Japanese yen, euro, Australian dollars. So we need to have enough foreign currency to trade with them. When you don't have enough foreign currency, they say, oh, this country is going bankrupt because they can't trade. So you need enough foreign reserves. International benchmark, all the banks will tell you that you need, this is the number of months, you should have at least 4 months worth of foreign reserves to be seen to be healthy. You can see what the level of foreign reserves in 2006. We had only $515 million. Today we have about $2.1 billion foreign reserves. Now, one thing which is really interesting, which I should point out to you, you see over here, 2010, we had $1.3 billion. If you take a line over here, that was about 4.7 months worth of foreign reserves at $1.3 billion. Look at it today. We have 2.1 billion, but we are saying we have 4.9 months worth of foreign reserves. Why? Because the economy has grown. People are demanding more goods and services from overseas. Every day as we are speaking, somebody somewhere in Fiji is getting connected to electricity. We'll be spending $50 million this year in extending the grid, rural electrification. And I've seen this with my own eyes. The moment people get electricity, what do? They go off and buy a fridge. They buy maybe 1 TV or 2 TVs. They buy a stereo. They buy a microwave. Somebody may buy a washing machine. And guess what? And none of these things are made in Fiji. So there's a huge demand for these white goods. So as the economy grows, more demands for goods and services increase. When people build better homes, they want to put a fan. Some people want to put air conditioning. None of these things are made in Fiji. So there's a huge demand for foreign reserves. We have to keep it healthy. Very quickly, debt. A lot of people talk about debt. They don't know anything about debt. I want to talk about debt. I'll explain to you about debt. There are 2 ways of measuring debt. Now, one is as a percentage of your GDP. So in other words, the value of your GDP, what percentage of it is in debt, to put it simply. You can see debt as a percent of our GDP has been coming down. It was 56% here. It's come down to below 46, now sits at 47%. Now, in nominal terms, in other words, the actual dollar value. What is the dollar value of our debt today? It's $5.1 billion. That's our level of debt today, in Fijian dollars, $5.1 billion. Now, let me tell you how the debt works for governments. When Fiji became independent, the Ratumara government, formed government, all governments in the world generally borrow money to stay afloat. In other words, they run deficit budgets. Governments generally tend to spend more than what they collect. Right? So they run a deficit. So the Ratumara government, they borrowed money. Ratumara government borrowed money, there's a debt. And then after the, pretty close, huh? So after the Ratumara government borrowed money, then you have 4 weeks of Babandra government. They probably borrowed money too, but they have to pay Ratumara government's debt. Then the Rambuka government came in. They borrowed money. They have to pay the debt of the Babandra government and Ratumara government. Then the Chaudhry government came in. They borrowed money. They have to pay everybody else's debt too. Then the Garase government came in. They borrowed money. They have to pay everybody else's debt too. By this stage, probably most of the Ratumara government debts are paid off. Of course, we came in. The Bainimarama government was appointed in 2007. The debt at the end of 2006 was $2.8 billion. So out of that $1.5 billion, $2.8 billion is from the previous governments. That's how the system works. And thankfully, none of the governments in Fiji has ever defaulted on paying any loans. So it's not the Ratumara government that took the debt as far as the other people who lend the money are concerned. It's the Fijian government that borrowed money. They don't care who the Prime Minister is. If you borrow money from World Bank, Asian Development Bank, whoever it is you borrow money from, is the country's debt. We've never defaulted on any of our debts. So the debt is, of course, $2.8 billion which we inherited. Today the debt is $5.1 billion. What you need to ask is, when we are borrowing, what are we borrowing to do? Are we borrowing to have a party? Are we borrowing the money to build a big convention center that may be used only once a year? Or are we borrowing money to build things? To build a road, to fix up the roads, to build a four-lane road from Nasori to Suva? Are we borrowing money to connect people to electricity? That's the most important part about borrowing. If you borrow, they need to borrow for the right purpose. I'll give you an example just to put in the GDP perspective. Assuming that I make $100. If I then go and borrow $20, then I would say my debt to GDP ratio is 20%. Right? 20 over 100 is 20%. So my debt to GDP ratio is 20%. What's the dollar value of my debt? Is $20. Assuming I become richer and I have $500. If I have $500, but I decide to borrow $50, 2.5 times more than what I borrowed before. I borrowed $50 as opposed to $20, but as a percent of GDP, it's only 10%. That's precisely the point that I'm trying to show you over here. So even though the debt value, the dollar value has gone up, as a percentage of a GDP, it's come down. Because our GDP has grown. We've become wealthier from that perspective. Now let's look at other countries. A lot of people say, oh, Fiji bole karza mein hai. Look at all the other countries, how much karza they have. Japan, debt to GDP ratio is 239.2%. Nobody says Japan is having problems. Singapore, 112%. United States, 107.4%. Canada, 92.3%. Everybody says Canada is doing really well, let's go there. Now, this percent of GDP, Fiji sits here at 47%. Let me take you and show you in dollar terms what's their debt. Japan's debt in US dollars is $11.8 trillion. That's their debt. But nobody says Japan is in trouble. Right? Singapore's debt is $332.7 billion. USA is the most debt-ridden country. $19.9 trillion. There's a level of debt. In dollar terms, dollar value, US dollars. You see over here, United States has got a much higher level of debt than Japan. But as a percent of GDP is 107.4. Japan is 239.2. Why? Because USA's economy is bigger. You know the example that I gave you. So if I have $100, I borrow $20, it's 20%. But if I have $500, I borrow $50, 2.5 times more, it's only 10%. Now look at Fiji. Fiji is US $2.47 billion. So this is the level of what you call the actual dollar value of the debt. And you can go and check this on Google and wherever this is, you find all of these figures. It's not being pulled out of the air. Now, what is really interesting, I went to Mauritius about 18 months ago. Mauritius is very similar to Fiji. Sugarcane based, now into tourism, etc. Mauritius decided to do what we have done, but on a bigger scale than us. They revamped the airports, built in 4-lane roads, they set up ICT parks, they paid for it. They went internationally, they said to all the big companies, come to Mauritius. The advantage Mauritius has, which we don't, is they're very close to Africa. And Africa is one of the fastest growing continents in the world. Very young population base. And you know, but everybody has this impression about Africa not being safe. So they went to all the big international companies, they said, you come, set up your base from Mauritius, law and order is good, everything is safe and sound, IT, internet is working well, roads are there, 4-lane roads, everything is modern, and we can service Africa from Mauritius. They went to India, got 2 or 3 Indian hospitals. They all set up base here. Went to the Africans and say, next time you go for your open heart surgery, come to Mauritius. You have your open heart surgery, then you have 2 weeks holiday with us too. It's what we call medical tourism. That's what they've done. So they went and borrowed very heavily. So their debt is $7.5 billion US dollars. Their population is about 1.3 million people. But the size of Mauritius, it's only one island, is about 1/5 of the size of Viti Levu. So Viti Levu's size is 10,000 square kilometers. Their land mass is about 2,000 square kilometers. But they have a population base of 1.3 million people, but they've managed to have this debt, but it's good debt. It's productive debt. So if anybody talk about debt, these are the actual figures itself. Now, just very quickly, where do we borrow our money from? So, this is the total government debt as at May 2018. Now, normally what we try and do, we try and keep our debt, we have domestic, we can borrow domestically, in other words, borrow from people in Fiji, and you can borrow from people from outside Fiji. We like to keep at least 70% of our debt within Fiji. It's better to do that, plus or minus 5, because if you borrow more locally, it's a lot more secure because you don't have foreign exchange, problems. Because if you borrow in US dollars, you have to pay in US dollars, and sometimes the value changes, so you have to set aside more money or less money. Now, these are the people we owe money to. So, Asian Development Bank, the 348.5 million, International Fund for Agricultural Development Fund 2.2 million, World Bank 148 million, JICA, Japanese 11.5 million, Exim Bank of China 516 million, Global Bond, which we raised globally, is $416.2 million. So, the total external debt, in other words, the overall percentage of debt from overseas is $29.7 million. So, recently there have been some silly statements made by people like Rambuka that the Chinese are going to take over and all that nonsense. It's all nonsense. The Chinese debt is as a percent of GDP is only 4.7%. And I can tell you exactly where the Chinese money, last we borrowed from the Chinese was in 2012. What did we borrow the money for? Namawalu Draketi Tahsiling, Buddha Bay Tahsiling, Sawani Syria Tahsiling, Valley Road Tahsiling, Motor Road Tahsiling and the bridge. And then we borrowed money for the Rewai housing from Exim Bank of China and Housing Authority, subdivision in Tatirua. They are the only ones. They don't have a mortgage. They can't take over anything. The same way that the World Bank, global bonds, nobody can take over anything. Normally when you have a mortgage is this. If I go to the bank and I say I want to borrow money to build this house or buy this house, the bank will say, okay, I'll lend you the money, but I need a mortgage over the house. The mortgage is taken like you have a legal right over the property. Right, so in the case that I default, that the bank moves in, takes over the house, sells the house, gets its money back. You don't have any mortgage held by any of these organizations. They can't, because we have what we call a sovereign debt, a government debt. When you borrow, when you lend to governments, you don't take a mortgage over anything. So that's our debt position. That's where the money comes from. Now, one very quick thing before I finish off. It's a very interesting set of figures. From 1980 to 2006, which is 27 years, all those governments that were there, they spent about $3.5 billion in infrastructure development, capital expenditure. And so the debt increased by 2.6 billion. From 2007 till now, we have spent double the amount, $7 billion. Our debt has increased by $2.3 billion. But the interesting thing is this. Every time they built something, they built a road or hospital or whatever it is, every dollar they spent, they borrowed 76 cents. Every time we have borrowed, we have built, and whenever we borrowed only 36 cents in a dollar. Why? Because we have savings. What we call operating savings. Operating savings is this. Government, of course, collect taxes. We collect revenue. If you then take our expenses out for day-to-day running of government, we've come here, we may have paid for this school hall, whatever it is. All of that is what you call operating expense. The salaries of teachers and everybody else, parliament, government ministers, all of that. You take all of the expenses out, we have a savings. So you're saving about 800 million, so about $1 billion this year we expect to save. So when we have the savings, then when we want to go and build something, we use this money first. And if we need additional money, that's when we go and borrow. So in other words, we have to borrow less to do more, because we have savings. You can imagine if we did not have the savings, assuming we had the savings like in the previous governments, then we would have had to borrow all of this money. So our debt would have got higher if we wanted to do a lot more infrastructure work. This simply just shows that we spend 40% of our budget essentially to build things. So again, it's got a family focus, as you know, with all the maternity leaves, paternity leaves, and the funding for the babies. We're building on all the previous budgets, 9 years of consecutive growth, and the fiscal position remains quite strong. Now, all of the stuff that I've said to you, you can go to this website, it's all there. If you go to the website, you will find this, the actual budget book, this one here. It's got every expense that every government ministry has. So, for example, if I'm just turn to this page here, I'll just open one page. So it says Republic of Fiji Military Forces, Program 1, Activity 3, 3FIR. It says upgrade of RFMF Lotoka Camp, $300,000. Right, so you can know this is how much money is going there. They're spending $3,000 for stationery and printing, hire of equipment, $5,000. The salaries, lodging allowance, field allowance, everything is here. So you can go and read this. You'll also find this. You know the ECAL I talked to you about, the Environment Climate Adaptation Levy and STT. By law, we brought in a new law last year that every single cent that we collect from ECAL and STT, we actually have to spend it only on environmental matters or climate adaptation matters. And we have to publish it. So this is published. It's called ECAL in Action. That's here. And you'll see where it's spent. So for example, these men are getting, water tanks and access to water, rural electrification, all of these things are there. You'll also find in the website these flyers. Now these flyers actually tell you which ministry is spending how much, which village, which settlement is getting how many water tanks, what's the size of the water tank, where will the roads be built, which jetty is getting made, all of those things are being, it's in that information. And these flyers actually, if I can, come on, you got one open? So, you have things like, all of this information is here. So, delivery of reliable infrastructure, if you open this up, it tells you exactly what's happening there. I'll give you a better one. Where's the one on the roads? Oh, here. So, rural electrification projects. That's how the money will be spent, and it tells you over here. Grid extension. It says Hari Charan and Sanjay Prasad, Vunakawanrawa subdivision, Korovuto Nandi. Number of applicants 13, total cost $34,111. So these people will now get electricity. So everything is listed here. So some of your relatives may be listed here, I don't know. So you can go and have a look. I've actually had people ring me up like last year and said, hey, you got this listed here, when is this getting done? So it's a good way of keeping track of things. So we can actually go to the, Energy Fiji Limited or Department of Energy, say what's happening over here. So all of this is listed, and I urge you to go and read it. And also, of course, Water Authority is here. Where will the extensions be done? And of course, the FRA road and all the breakdown is there. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's a quick snapshot of the budget, and all that information is available there. Well, I'd like to now open up the floor. If you have any questions, any queries, please feel free to do so. We've got somebody going around with the mic, and they'll pass it to you. Thanks.